What's up, everybody? Troy Cartwright here. Welcome back to another episode of 10-Year Town. We are coming up on our 1-year anniversary. I can't believe it. I can't believe we've already been doing this for a year. I am notoriously horrible at celebrating anything. I don't like my birthday. I don't ever really like to do anything, to be honest with you. When I've had something good happen in my life, historically, I just kind of pretend it isn't happening, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to take some of the advice that I've learned from this podcast from people that have done it and are much wiser than me. And like Mark Beeson said, this is the ride. And that is something that has really stuck with me. I've learned so much over this past year doing the podcast. I feel so lucky to get to do this and to share all the things that I've learned from these amazing guests with you guys. So I have a simple request. If you are a listener of this podcast, I would love it if you would record a little voice memo or write a short note, a short email, and send either that voice memo or that note to my email address, which is troycartwrightmusic@gmail.com, and tell me what you've learned from 10-Year Town, how it's helped you, something you hadn't thought about, anything like that. It would be amazing to hear or read, and I think we're going to take a few of those voice memos and try and incorporate that into an episode that we're going to do later this month celebrating 1 year of 10-Year Town. So again, open up your iPhone or whatever, hit voice record on your voice memo app, tell me something you learned from this podcast, and send it to me. That's it. I just feel like this has been a pretty one-way conversation from me and the guests to you guys, and I want to hear back from y'all, and I'd love to hear it in your own voice. But even if you don't feel comfortable doing a voice memo, just send me an email, send me a note, and I'll bundle a bunch together. And I don't know exactly what we're going to do with it, but we're going to do something, and I just wanted to say that I'm aware that this thing that we're doing here is special and that it's a lot bigger than me, and I don't ever want to take it for granted. It's cool. I really enjoy doing it, and I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do next, but I'm excited about it. I'm excited about all this stuff. As long as I can keep providing value to you guys, this is something that I love investing my time in. So anyway, without further ado, here is part 2 of our amazing interview with Chris DuBois. Thanks. What do you think about the state of the music industry today? It feels like we've gone through a lot of changes, and you've probably seen even more, throughout your career. But how does it, I don't know, what do you think it looks like today?
Well, I think it's a great time to be a consumer of music. I think, I'm compartmentalizing here. I'm not talking about what it's like to be a songwriter right now, but in terms of just music as a whole, I see my children and how they consume music and how they turn me on to music. And it's like, where did you find this?
Yeah.
They're not finding it on the radio. They're finding it on social media or on the, Spotify For You page or whatever it may be. But, new music drops and it's on their phone instantly.
Yeah.
They don't have to drive to the record store. Now, I'm nostalgic about that. I miss the old days, as a lot of guys that were consuming music through the 80s and the 90s are. I mean, I miss elements of that, but the ability to have virtually any song that was ever recorded in your pocket is amazing.
Yes. As a consumer, for
Absolutely.
Sure. Yep.
Now, it creates an enormous challenge. It's like, as songwriters, how do we compete? How do we continue to make money? And it's tough because, these days, back in the early days of SeaGayle or the early 2000s, there were still records being sold. So you could get a song on an album that sold 2 million copies and recoup your publishing deal on an album cut.
Yeah.
Those days are gone. Recoupment is a pipe dream.
Right.
Unless you have co-publishing. And the only way that you're really going to get co-publishing is if you have a hit, and that still depends on radio.
Right.
And I'd like to think at some point that's going to change, but right now we're still vying for singles, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
But I still see songs getting cut without, political ties, without the artist's name in parentheses. I mean, it can still happen. But in terms of how we're approaching it as a publishing company, we're just trying to create opportunities for the writers in the writers' rooms and trying to get them in the camps. If they can't get it right with Luke Combs, well, can we get them writing with somebody who writes with Luke Combs?
Yeah.
Just as an example. And then just creating those opportunities is all we can really do. And just focus on the creative process. One thing that hasn't changed over the past 25 years is what it takes to write a great song.
Yeah. Which is, the hardest thing to explain, but you know it when you hear it.
Yeah.
You know what a great song is when you hear it.
That's right.
Is that, I guess you recently started kind of, I don't know if would you consider it a new thing or like an extension of what you were doing, or like, is there like I don't know. I thought I saw something in Music Row about like a.
Yes, we did. We, the reality of it is, in this current climate of publishing, every company is looking for ways to grow.
Yeah.
And, one of our employees in our office, JD Groover, it's been very unique since the day we hired him. Because when we hired him, he was tour managing an artist on Capitol Records, John Langston.
Yeah.
And we allowed him to continue tour managing John Langston while he was working for us.
Yeah.
And that was a nice supplemental income for him, but it also was an opportunity for him to be out on the road with other artists, other writers. It was creating opportunities for our in-house writers with him working with John Langston. So we saw the benefits to it, and that's a skill set that was a natural evolution for him. And JD and I met a manager out of Los Angeles, Jeff Ogunlesi, who doesn't have a footprint in Nashville but was looking to expand.
Gotcha.
And we ended up partnering with Jeff. JD and I did to find some clients in the Nashville space. So it's really just in its infancy, but we're excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah. I guess from my perspective, it seems like the way that Nashville is developing artists is changing a lot. I guess it just feels faster now. So people are getting deals, they're kind of getting signed off TikToks or something, or social media before they maybe even have written that many songs or have, I don't know, the sort of base knowledge of songwriting. So I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people just getting kind of thrown in to the deep end of the creative process, if you will. And it seems like there's a lot of publishers now that are kind of essentially doing artist development.
Sure.
And I don't know how that changes in the future, because it's all of the money right now. A lot of the money is flowing through the master, because we're having a lot of, as songwriters, I feel like we're having a lot of headwind with the mechanical rates. So do you see that as I guess like an opportunity where publishers are going to have to get into the master game a little bit, or does that?
Well, I think publishers are getting into the master game, and we certainly have been, just in the sense that when we sign these developing artists, the first thing we do is just try to get them focused creatively. We try to make sure that they're active on the social media, be it TikTok or Instagram. But we're also just trying to get the music right, and trying to pair them with the right writers, pair them with the right producers. When the time is right, get them in the studio, get the music recorded, and help them get it released. Because virtually impossible now to go down the street, set up a meeting with a label, pitch them some demos, and get a record deal. It just doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah.
They're wanting to know what the story is. They want to see what kind of traction you have. So that's a big part of our focus, is trying to get that traction going.
Yeah.
And it's a challenge. It's the same challenge every publisher in town has. Everybody's trying to catch lightning in a bottle, and sometimes it happens, but hard to find the answer of how it happened.
Yeah. I mean, once you figure one thing out, you know, the game just changes so fast now.
Right.
It's crazy. It feels like, especially since COVID, it's even gotten crazier.
Oh yeah.
It's just gotten faster and faster.
Well, and it's frustrating for somebody like myself who remembers the old days when you could sign a writer like Trent Willman. When we first signed him, he was our first writer we signed, but we knew he wanted to be an artist. We believed in him. He wrote for a couple of years. We got the songs that we felt like we needed. We went in and cut demos. We did a showcase at 12th and Porter, and the next day he had 2 record label offers.
Yeah.
I mean, those days just don't happen anymore.
Right.
Because he didn't release any music. He wasn't touring. Now it's a whole different metric. I mean, you have to take the development process and just kind of multiply it times 10.
Yeah.
And back in those days, they would do development deals at the labels. And,
right.
I just don't hear of those types of deals being done anymore because they're looking for artists that already have the following, that already have the trends, and they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah. And I think it's easy to like, I don't know, look at it and go like, oh, well, labels are just lazy now. But I don't really think of it that way. I just think that you can get so much further in the process now, kind of independently or whatever. So why wouldn't you sign something that's already there? I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me.
I get it. I mean, we may not necessarily all agree
right.
on what is considered great music, and we don't even, a lot of people around town will scratch their heads, myself included, on why something's taking off, because you listen to it and think, well, I don't necessarily hear how that's great. Well, it doesn't have to be great.
No.
It doesn't have to be great to work on a major scale. The frustrating part is when you have great artist-writers that don't catch that lightning in the bottle on social media and struggle to find those opportunities.
Yeah.
But that's tough.
Yeah.
But it's always been that way to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has never been a talent contest. Some of the most talented writers and artists that you could ever hear just won't have notoriety, won't have the success that others do.
Yeah. It's life.
Yeah.
It's reality.
Exactly.
which can be brutal. Do you remember, like with Chris Stapleton, for example? I mean, everyone's always just talked about obviously his voice has always been incredible.
Sure.
He's always been an amazing songwriter. Like, was that, I don't know, it seems like it came out of nowhere. What was that, 2015, 2014?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
But I don't know, from your perspective, like, did it? Or was it always there? And
well, I mean, we used to, when Chris first signed, when Liz O'Sullivan was still working for us, we used to joke around the office when new people would come in and Stapleton was there. We'd get him to literally hold the phone book and sing the phone book. It's like a party trick. That was before iPhones. And I wish we had some of that stuff on video because we just don't. But yes, he was always just otherworldly talented, and it was very obvious. What was interesting is, when we first signed him, he expressed to me that, just stardom and notoriety wasn't necessarily what he was after.
Yeah.
I mean, some of his biggest influences were like Daryl Scott and Tim O'Brien and like Sugar Hill Records and the types of records they were putting out. And I think, that's reflected in like the first artist project that he did being with the Steel Drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, doing a bluegrass record. And that became, successful in that space, and he developed a fan base. He also did a rock record called the Johnson Brothers, obviously a lot more edgy than the Steel Driver stuff, but he was just kind of feeling his way around. And I remember he came in one day and said that he was ready to pursue it on a grander scale.
Yeah.
I think he mentally was taking that approach, but that didn't mean he was willing to sell his soul.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember there was one day where Mike Dungan came over to the office and Stapleton played some songs for him. Mike ended up offering him a record deal, and at some point along the way, the deal just kind of fell apart, and I think it was creative differences. Point being, he wanted to have creative control that they just weren't willing to give to him at that point, which is completely understandable.
Right.
But as he continued to have success as a writer and his side projects continued to have success, Brian Wright at Universal reached out and said, hey, if you'll come back, we'll let you make the type of record that you want to make.
Yeah.
And so he did. By the time he made that Traveler record, he had such a fan base in Nashville that they loved his writing. They loved his Steel Drivers project, and the people that had heard the Johnson Brothers had loved that. So when he put out that Traveler record, even though it didn't have initial commercial success, there was such a fan base in town of what he was doing that that album got nominated for Album of the Year.
Wow.
And that was, I don't even think it had sold 100,000 copies yet.
Yeah.
And but it created the opportunity on the CMAs.
Yeah.
Timberlake, my understanding is that Timberlake was the one that requested he perform with Stapleton because he'd heard him.
Yeah.
And Stapleton ended up not only getting nominated for those CMA awards that night, he won all of them.
Yeah.
And then he had that moment with Timberlake. So yeah, in a sense, the rest of the world, it's just like they turned on a switch and said, "Here's Chris Stapleton."
Right.
But that was this is your 10-year town podcast. I mean, he was digging in deep for 10 years before that really happened.
Yeah. That was, so intertwined with my own journey. I was still living in Dallas. I was playing all over Texas, and I had actually, I had a independent radio promoter in Texas, a girl named Angela Lampton, and she's the one that actually introduced me to Jake Gear. So I'd come to the SeaGayle offices a few times and just played him songs, and he was like, "Oh, it's cool, keep sending me stuff." And I remember seeing Chris Stapleton in Dallas, and it was a nice crowd. I mean, there was a few hundred people there. I mean, he was certainly on his way. That Traveler record was out, but this was pre-CMA.
Sure.
I think it was like a week before. And I remember getting home from a gig and like turning it on and seeing him do that. And it was like, this is it. Yeah. And then it just immediately.
Yeah. My understanding is the number one search on Google the next day was, "Who is Chris Stapleton?"
Yeah.
It felt like overnight, but there was a lot more to the story than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was, when I was like, all right, I got to move to Nashville. I mean, I think that was the moment for a lot of people.
Yeah.
When they just knew that, I don't know, for me, it was Jake setting me up with, my first co-write, which was with Clint Daniels.
Yeah.
We wrote this song called "Don't Fade," and then he took me to Red Door afterwards and was like, "All these people are songwriters." It's like, what?
Yeah.
I had no idea that it existed.
Oh yeah.
So it was really, really special. And that, I mean, I'm glad I moved.
Yeah.
I'm
glad you did too.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, last question here. If you, could go back to a version of younger you and give him one piece of advice for the journey ahead, what would you say? What would you tell him?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm thankful for what I didn't know. I mean, that's, I think about my son. My son's 19, just finished his freshman year at Belmont, and he's in the music business program. He's putting out music, and he's just chasing the dream.
Yeah.
And part of me just wants to go, "Gosh, you're so smart. Do something else." Because I just know the realities of it. But, I'm thankful that I didn't. The best thing that my father ever did for me was not discourage me.
Yeah.
He didn't push me to do anything that I'm doing. And in some ways, I think he was a little concerned about nepotism when I actually took Brad Paisley to his house early on, and we got the little pat on the head, and it just felt like a complete rejection. And he eventually signed Brad to a record deal, but he was the last one at the label to bite because everybody knew. But all that to say, I don't even know what I would say, because I wouldn't want my path to change. I certainly have made my share of mistakes along the way, whether it be writers that I could have signed that I didn't.
Yeah.
Or moments when I was, at the pinnacle of my success where I maybe didn't capitalize on success the way that I could have. Mm. But that would have had to have changed the approach that I've taken throughout my career.
Yeah.
And I'm at peace with the career that I've had and the culture that we've created. One thing that has been difficult to balance through the years has been me, the publisher, and me, the writer. And I don't love, you'll never see my face on a banner out in front of the building. And I don't like to talk a lot around the office about the success that I've had, because I'm try to be sensitive to the other writers and their pursuits, because at the end of the day, they may be wearing a SeaGayle jersey, but it's their name on the back and it's their name on the front.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all part of the same family, but I don't want it to ever feel like I'm pushing myself.
Yeah.
But I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast that, the Publisher of the Year awards that we won are more meaningful to me than the 3 Writer of the Year awards I've won.
Yeah.
Just because that, to me, says a lot about the culture and an accomplishment that is just so difficult, and I'm so proud of it. We did a show last week that was commemorating like 25 years. It was like a private show, and it was an emotional night. Brad performed, and it's kind of felt like a culmination of things that had happened for the last 25 years. So that's a really long-winded non-answer.
No, that's an amazing answer.
So,
I mean, I think that there's a lot of joy to be had in building something that's a lot bigger than yourself. And I think that especially in the music business, we can get so focused on what we have to do about the individual person, because it is so hard. It's so hard to, especially at the beginning, it's just hard to survive.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't know what you're doing, and, people come and go and deals come and go, and it can be hard to navigate. But I know recently I've just really been focusing kind of on the journey as a whole, and the people that I get to go on it with. And I don't know, that seems to like bring me a lot more fulfillment than just thinking about, if I can get a couple 100,000 views on a TikTok or something, right? It's like I enjoy the process as a whole.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's like when I come home, my wife says, "How was your day?" I said, "Man, it was great." It's like, "Really? What'd you do?" I said, "I just wrote a song."
Yeah. It's a pretty good day.
Well, and it's those days. It's, I get to sit in a room with some of my best friends and do what we love to do. And if we can tap into an idea that gets everybody thinking, and gets everybody moving, and, you're trying to create something that you would want to listen to on repeat, and that's fun.
Yeah.
And I've had days where it's not, where it's felt like a challenge. It's felt like a slog.
Yeah.
So those days when I'm able to say it was a great day, rarely is it tethered to a success that I've had. It's really tethered to what I felt like was a successful creative process in the room that day.
Yeah.
I've had people say, "How do you stay driven to write songs after 25 years?" And I'm not driven by the pursuit of another number one. That's not really what drives me. It's still a great idea, and I still love the process of chasing that idea down and turning it into a great song. And it can be a slow process sometimes, but it's a fun process.
Yeah, man, that's very beautiful. It's very inspiring. So, this has been a great episode. Thank you so much for telling your story and for being here.
You're welcome.
Yeah. All right, that's it. That's the pod. See you later. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of 10-Year Town. If you're still listening, you must have liked it. So we hope that you will leave us a rating or review on Apple or Spotify, or give us a subscription on YouTube. It's all free. Don't cost you nothing. But we appreciate you being here, and thank you for supporting the 10-Year Town community. See you next week.